One press conference, one carefully worded statement, and suddenly the entire basketball world is divided about something that has nothing to do with jump shots or defensive rotations. Paige Bueckers stepped to the microphone, addressed the relationship question directly, said she was only saying it once, and walked away expecting the conversation to end. It did not end. It got louder. Welcome back to Hoop Scripted, where we cover every story in women's basketball that the mainstream conversation gets wrong or refuses to touch honestly. Today, we are breaking down what Paige actually said, why the reaction exploded the way it did, what Azzi Fudd's presence on the same roster actually means for the Dallas Wings, and the bigger question sitting underneath all of it about what happens when personal life and professional basketball share the same locker room. Here is the statement that started everything. Paige Bueckers addressed media at her introductory press conference and delivered what she clearly intended to be a final word on the subject. She said their relationship is nobody's business but their own, that what they choose to share is completely up to them, that they have been navigating this dynamic for a long time, and that nothing off the court would affect what happens on it. She said it with clarity, without hesitation, and with the energy of someone who had rehearsed exactly how much she was willing to give the media on this particular topic. And then she asked if they could please talk about basketball. The room did not move on. The irony sitting at the center of this entire situation is almost too clean to be accidental. Paige Bueckers publicly announced on TikTok that she and Azzi Fudd were in a relationship. That announcement was her choice, made voluntarily, on her own platform, to her own audience. And now she is standing at a professional press conference asking that same public audience to respect a boundary around the information she herself introduced into the public conversation. That is not necessarily wrong or unreasonable as a human being, but as a public figure operating in a growing and increasingly scrutinized professional league, it creates a tension that no single press conference statement can fully resolve, regardless of how well it is delivered. The basketball question underneath all of the relationship noise is the one that actually deserves serious examination. Did the Dallas Wings draft Azzi Fudd with the #1 overall pick purely on basketball merit? Or did Paige Bueckers factor into that decision in ways the organization would never officially confirm? Bueckers said directly that her relationship had nothing to do with the selection. A significant portion of the basketball community does not believe that, and the skepticism is not entirely unreasonable. The Wings had options at that pick. They made a specific choice. James and Bueckers share a documented personal history stretching back to their time together at UConn. Front offices make decisions based on chemistry, fit, and roster harmony all the time. Believing that personal relationships play zero role in any of those calculations requires a level of institutional faith that professional sports has rarely earned. Here is where the conversation gets genuinely complicated beyond the surface-level reaction. Two professional athletes in a romantic relationship sharing the same locker room, the same practice schedule, the same competitive goals, and the same daily professional pressures is not a hypothetical scenario anymore. It is the current operational reality of the Dallas Wings heading into the 2026 season. If everything works, if the chemistry translates, if the personal and professional boundaries hold, if both players perform at the level their talent suggests they should, this becomes one of the most compelling stories in the league. Two elite players who built something real off the court, bringing that connection onto it in ways that make the team better. That is the best-case version of this situation, and it is genuinely possible. But professional sports has a documented history of showing that even minor interpersonal friction between teammates can disrupt entire seasons. And romantic relationships ending inside shared professional environments tend to produce more than minor friction. The media question that the Dallas Wings organization shut down at the press conference was legitimate, regardless of how uncomfortable it made everyone in that room. Journalists covering a professional sports team have a professional responsibility to ask about factors that could affect team performance and locker room dynamics. A romantic relationship between two starting players on the same roster qualifies as exactly that kind of factor. Shutting the question down with a blanket policy statement does not make the underlying concern disappear. It simply moves the conversation from the press conference room to social media, where it loses any nuance it might have had and gets replaced by speculation, hot takes, and the kind of narrative construction that neither Bueckers nor James has any ability to control or correct. Hoopscripted believes the organization's communication approach here actually made the situation harder to manage, not easier. Paige Bueckers is one of the most genuinely talented players this league has ever recruited from the college game. Her performance at UConn across multiple seasons demonstrated an offensive creativity and competitive composure that translates directly to the professional level. Azzi James was selected first overall for reasons that exist entirely independent of who she is dating, and dismissing her ability to contribute at the highest level because of her personal relationship is both unfair and analytically lazy. Both of these players deserve to be evaluated on what they produce on the floor. The challenge is that they themselves, specifically Bueckers through the TikTok announcement, introduced the personal narrative into the public space first. The media did not discover a secret. They received an invitation and are now being asked to forget it was ever extended. The broader story sitting underneath everything that happened in that press conference is about where the WNBA currently exists as a league and what that means for every player operating within it. This is not the WNBA of 5 years ago, operating in a niche environment where stories faded quietly without generating broader cultural conversation. This is a league with national television deals, growing sponsorship commitments, increasing attendance, and a fan base that is expanding rapidly and paying close attention to everything. That visibility is the thing every player in this league fought for. It is what the CBA negotiations were about. It is what the marketing campaigns, the social media strategies, and the personal brand building have all been working toward. But visibility is not selective. It does not amplify the highlights while quietly absorbing the complications. It amplifies everything simultaneously and with equal intensity. Paige Bueckers is right in the middle of learning that specific lesson in real time, and the way she and James handle what comes next will say more about their professionalism and their partnership than any single press conference statement ever could. Hoopscripted will be watching every game, every interaction, and every moment on that Dallas court this season, with full awareness of everything that was said and everything that was deliberately left unsaid. Drop your honest take below. Do you think this situation helps or hurts the Dallas Wings when the games actually start mattering? What comes next is where the real evaluation begins, because once the games start, narratives either fade or get reinforced by performance. And for Paige Bueckers and Azzi James, the margin for error is going to feel much smaller than it would for most rookie pairings entering a new system. Not because of their talent, but because of the attention surrounding them. Every possession, every substitution pattern, every visible interaction on the bench or during timeouts is going to be analyzed through two different lenses at the same time. One is purely basketball. The other is everything that exists around it. And that dual layer of scrutiny changes how situations are interpreted. A missed pass between two teammates might normally be seen as a simple miscommunication. In this case, it could be framed as tension. A moment of visible frustration could be exaggerated into something much bigger than it actually is. Even normal competitive body language, the kind that shows up on every team in every game, may get assigned meaning that has nothing to do with what is actually happening on the floor. That is the reality of playing in a spotlight that extends beyond performance. At the same time, there is also a significant opportunity embedded in all of this. Because if Bueckers and James are able to navigate this environment successfully, if they establish clear communication, maintain professionalism, and produce at a high level, they can redefine how situations like this are perceived in the league. They can turn what many see as a potential liability into a point of strength. Chemistry, when it is real and properly managed, can elevate a team in ways that statistics alone do not capture. But that requires consistency. It requires discipline in moments that are not always easy to manage. And most importantly, it requires both players to maintain a clear separation between what belongs inside the team environment and what belongs outside of it. That line does not need to be publicly explained, but it does need to be internally understood. For the Dallas Wings organization, this situation also becomes a test of leadership and structure. Because talent alone does not carry a team through a season filled with external pressure. Coaching staff, veteran presence, and front office messaging all play a role in shaping how distractions are handled. The most successful teams are not the ones that avoid attention, but the ones that absorb it without allowing it to disrupt their focus. And that is where the Wings will need to be very intentional. Clear expectations, consistent communication, a strong emphasis on team identity over individual narrative. Those are the elements that will determine whether this situation remains background noise or evolves into something that affects performance. There is also a broader implication here for the league itself. The WNBA is growing. It is attracting new audiences, new conversations, and new levels of engagement. With that growth comes increased scrutiny, not just of games, but of players as public figures. And as that trend continues, situations like this are not going to be rare. They are going to become more common. How they are handled will shape the culture of the league moving forward, not just for players, but for media, for fans, and for organizations trying to balance authenticity with professionalism. There is no simple formula for that balance, but there is a clear pattern in how successful teams operate within it. They stay grounded in what they can control. So when you look ahead, the most important factor is not the conversation happening online right now. It is what happens over the next few weeks and months. Do the Wings establish a rhythm? Do Bueckers and James integrate smoothly into the system? Does the team build trust and cohesion in a way that makes outside narratives irrelevant? Those are the outcomes that will ultimately define this situation. Because in professional sports, attention is temporary, but performance is lasting. And once the ball is in play, everything else fades into the background.